Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Chambers. Welcome, and I hope wherever you are safe, healthy, and happy. Go ahead and grab that blanket, that drink, that furry friend, and curl up because it's time to talk travel. Today we're going to be talking about, is it safe for pets to fly? Also, emotional support animals versus service animals, and some friendly hotel chains for your pets as you travel. And stick around to the end of the show as I go through the top 10 dog-friendly cities in the U.S. You're not going to want to miss it. Let's dive in. All right, it's that big question that everyone always wants to know. Is it safe for pets to fly? Everyone has their own opinion on whether they should bring their pet. And I know everyone, even me, I'm a pet owner, we consider our pets part of the family. They're like children. If we don't have children, they almost take the place of children if they haven't in your lives already like they have ours. But they are very much a part of your family, and whenever you can take them with you, I think it's great. I actually think it's really wonderful. But when I travel with my pet, it's usually, my dog usually comes with us when we drive or we do something that is in the car. I feel a little bit safer personally that way, and I feel like I can at least control the environment a little bit more and a little bit easier with less variables than it is when you fly. But people have had their pets fly, and sometimes, let's say you're moving and you're going overseas, or you're going really far, and you have to take a plane to get there. Traveling by car or train is just not as accessible for you or possible at that point. And you need to bring your pet with you. Obviously, you're not going to just cast them away, but you need to bring them with you. So we always ask ourselves, is it really safe to fly? And it can be. There's a lot of people that have looked at this issue over the years, and obviously things are never perfect, no matter how we look at it. I think you can put yourself in the situation where your pet can fly safely. And I do believe that the airlines and everybody else who is taking care of your pets within the process is doing the best job that they can, or we hope that they're doing the best job that they can to make sure that you feel comfortable, and that, more importantly, that your friend and your family member, your pet, feels comfortable as they travel. And we know that airline travel and just flying in general can be very stressful sometimes, and very stressful on us, let alone your dogs. And there's a lot of things that go into it, whether I would say, is it safe for your pet to fly? In general, I think that it is and can be. My personal opinion is that I don't think that you should fly with your pet unless you absolutely have to, and it's one of those situations where you have no choice. And that's just my personal opinion. And I found an article, it was some time ago, but I found an article in the Smithsonian Magazine, and it dates back a little bit. Back in 2013 is when I found this article. And Kristen Thiessen, the director of pet care issues for the Humane Society of the United States at the time, is quoted in this article And she believes that air travel is simply too stressful for most animals, especially when they're placed in aircraft's cargo hold. And you think about that, you have to just say that, a cargo hold. And especially when we think of these animals and these our pets as our family, that's not exactly where you would want to put your pet if you think about it. And she quotes, "Flying is frightening for animals. They can sense the pressure changing and they can tell that something is happening, and that's scary. Flying is frightening if you don't know what's happening," end quote. And I tend to agree with her on this. You know, I know this article was written some time ago, but I still think that it holds true because there's only so much room in the cabins. I mean, they're trying to make space now for more leg room and things like that, but you have to pay for that. And some of the leg room that you get is just not really accessible. So even if you're not having your pet in the cargo hold and they are traveling with you in the cabin, there's still not a lot of room. And on top of that, some breeds don't really travel well. You have to really know your dog and or your cat or whatever your animal is and know that they don't always travel well. Now, I'm going to reiterate this. I don't think that you should fly with your pet. That's just my belief. I really don't believe you need to. It's a necessity. Again, in normal circumstances like a vacation, if you're coming back home, leave your pet there. That's my take on it. It's really going to make a great reunion when you come home and see their happy face or they want to cuddle with you or their tail's wagging or whatever kind of pet you have, the reaction. It tends to be a much happier experience anyway. But if you do decide you're going to fly, there are things that you should be looking at doing before your trip. Okay, I'm going to go through a couple of them. So things that you need to be able to make sure that you're doing before you travel are pretty simple and pretty common, but they're just things that we forget sometimes. So to remind you of a few things that you need to be thinking about if you are not. And again, these are, reminders. I think most people know to have them, but just in case, I'm so happy that I can share something that might trigger you to a reminder for you or to just make you aware of something that maybe you haven't been doing. So before you even travel, you want to make sure, first and foremost, that your pet and whatever animal that you have traveling with you is fit to travel. Older dogs and cats and animals, when they have illnesses or get to a certain age, it's just not safe for them to be traveling. It can trigger so many different things, but if you are on the fence about it and you think that maybe my pet is a little too old, I always recommend consulting your vet or an animal specialist to really talk to them and figure out, is it safe for my pet to travel? So that's first and foremost. The next thing you want to make sure you do is get an ID collar with all your info and, your address, so everything that you have or some way of contacting. I know now most pets have the chip in them. You want to make sure that at least that information is up to date and all of your information in there is correct. It's also important to take medical documents or pictures of your medical documents. If you don't have a hard photocopy and you're not one of those that you like to carry around the hard copy, put it on a disc or on your computer. That's fine. I like to snap things with my phone, having the picture right there. It's kind of like when you go into the airport and you go drop your car off, you just take a picture of the parking lot or your ticket so you don't ever forget or have to hang on to that piece of paper to remember where your car is parked. You can do the same thing for your medical docs for your pets and things. That way they're really accessible because everyone typically has their phone within an arm reach when you're traveling. So that's something that you can do. It's really important to know the medical records when you're going somewhere anyway. You want to also make sure you have the proper crate. Whether you're having your pet travel inside the cabin or they're forced to transport in the cargo area, you want to make sure that you have the proper crate. And you want to go and it needs to be IATA approved, and you can go to their website and you can check out lists of credentials and things that you need to know about purchasing those crates. But, just make sure that it is IATA approved. And any crate or carrier should be large enough for your pet to sit, stand, turn around with ease. All of those. All three of them. So they need to be able to sit, stand, and turn around with ease. So these are all things before you even go as far as prep. So consulting your vet, making sure that they're fit, making sure their ID colors and all, don't just go right to, I bet they would look adorable in this little outfit on our trip. No, there are more important things that you need to look at first. Yes, I'm sure they would look adorable in those little outfits on your trip and make great Instagram photos for you to post for your travel adventures, but you want to make sure that their safety is first. So once you have all that kind of under control, you want to look at preparing your pet for a trip, especially when you're flying. Now, this can go towards preparing a pet for a road trip, or if you're going on a train, something like that. If they are not used to doing or traveling in any of these ways, it can be, again, stressful for an animal to travel like this if they're not used to it. So prepping your pet for the trip is actually a really great idea. It's kind of, think of it like a rehearsal. You're going to rehearse for your trip, and it creates that habit and those situations that the pet can be a little bit more comfortable when doing. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you're taking your pet, your dog or your cat or whoever it is, before you board a plane. Make sure you take them for a walk. Make sure that when you get to the airport, let them sniff around, get a little bit more comfortable with the surroundings. Granted, they're going to be on an airplane. It's going to be different, but let them hear the noises. And one, they can go to the bathroom and things like that, not on the plane, right? So you want that to be all taken care of. But this also allows them to get a better sense of where they are and what's about to happen. Again, not my choice to fly with my dog, but again, if you need to or you have to do this, or you're just one of those that it's okay for you, then these are things I recommend. Don't fly with your pet during hot summer months. Okay, that's just one thing I want to throw out there again. And we'll go through a couple more right here. You want to make sure that you also arrange for direct flights. Don't get these transfers, because it just causes, there's delays and things happen. It's stressful. It's stressful on everyone. No one likes delays. So imagine what your pet is going through, right? It can also slow things up with the way that they're loaded or unloaded if they had to travel underneath the plane. So, and depending your animal size, you could purchase a pet space in the passenger cabin. Sometimes they allow you to, if they fit under your seat or in your lap, and it's a fee. You just have to check whatever airline, but you can possibly purchase a seat or a spot in the cabin for them. If you check your pet into the luggage hold, remind the airline staff and the baggage handlers that there's a live animal on board. Now, they will do their best and all that, but you just want to remind them. Also, there are certain breeds that don't do well, that have respiratory problems. Make sure your breed, talk with your vet and make sure it's not one of those breeds that has issues, because putting that amount of stress or that pressure, when flying, it could really cause them problems. So just keep that in mind. So those are things at the airport that you're going to want to do. Now, before getting to the airport, or if you're going on a car trip, a good thing to do is to put the crate or whatever you're traveling your pet in, it's going to be traveling in your car, and have them get comfortable just being in the crate for starters, and then putting the crate in the car and then driving them around, like short trips. Like you could get in the car and take a little short trip around the block, or you could, drive, and each week maybe increase it a little bit longer every day if you want to, make the trip a little bit longer, and so they can kind of get used to feeling the car or train or what a plane would feel like humming, while they're there, and make them a little bit more comfortable. That's just a really great thing to do. I highly recommend it. My dog, when he was a puppy, when I had him, my first dog, he had to get used to the car. He was really crazy and very energetic, and it was great. But once he got used to the car, he could easily do, a long, we could do an 8-hour road trip we would stop and stretch our legs, but I mean, we could easily do an 8-hour road trip where he would hop out, do his thing, like we get at a rest stop and then get back in the car. He'd lay back down, and there's times he would be looking over my shoulder, and then most of the time that during the ride, he was fast asleep. So that actually helped. So the more that I had him in the car and on these short trips, the more comfortable he was. I never took him on a plane. I was not my choice again. So, but the last thing I want to leave you with, whether you choose to fly, whether you think it's okay, whether you don't, I leave that up to you and to your research and talking to your own vets about your animal, your pets and your family members. But this I leave you with in this segment. If your pet is left at home, I said this earlier, just think about how happy they're going to be when they see you. Just think of the excitement that your animal is going to see. Coming up after the break, I'll be talking about emotional support animals versus service animals. You're not going to want to miss it.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. We just finished talking about whether pets should fly when we go on vacation. I personally believe that they should not. There's too many risks that are involved, in my opinion. And if your pet doesn't have to go through all that stress, then why put them there? As much as we want them to be with us, they're going to be there when you get back. So the only reason that I think you should be traveling with your pet on a plane is if you have to. But jumping a little bit, this segment, we're going to be talking about emotional support animals versus service animals. And these are animals that tend to, if not have to, travel with you on a plane or whatever service you're using. And a lot of people start thinking that they're the same thing. Emotional support animals and service animals are all the same thing. And they're not. That is a misconception, because I've been in airports and other places, and you can tell a difference, one, with the animal that they're there, just by the way the animal is behaving, personally. And emotional support animals, if you don't know, is a companion, an animal companion, which is not necessarily a work animal. And this animal provides therapeutic benefits to a person with either a medically diagnosed disability or some kind of medical condition. And the support animals do not have to be trained for their role, but medical documentation is required in order to receive the certificate that this is an emotional support animal. You can't be counted on these animals to necessarily behave in public areas. And not saying that they're not going to be well behaved in public areas or in public in general, but they don't have to be trained to do that. So that's an emotional support animal. Now, the difference, a service animal is a trained animal that performs a specific function or a job that her or his or her owner can't perform on their own due to a physical, intellectual, or emotional disability. Now, right there, the emotional disability, I think, is where people assume that an emotional support animal is the same thing as a service dog. but they're not. These dogs are trained specifically to help with those functions. And if it is an emotional disability, the dog is still trained. Now, can you get your dog trained as an emotional support animal? Yes, you can. You can get your dog trained. And once you've gone through the proper steps for that, you can get the documentation saying that they're trained and they've been tested and things like that. But they move into the category of a service animal at that point, not a emotional support animal. And a lot of people I've seen over the years have started bringing animals on the plane. One, either they paid for a seat and just wanted their dog with them. And then others, they would use it because emotional support animals and service animals do not have to pay for, if they're approved, do not have to pay for a plane ticket or a flight, right? They come on as free, as their service to you. They help with whatever condition that person has. It's like saying someone, if they don't have a wheelchair, if they use a wheelchair, that you can't bring the wheelchair with you. It's like, no, that's not how it works. So that's why these animals are allowed or have been allowed to come on once approved and fly free. And I think people were starting to take advantage of that a little bit. There was years ago when ABC did a whole story on this, and they actually had someone go undercover and start bringing animals and seeing what the process would be and how easy it was to do it. And then they just started getting a little bit more ridiculous with the animals. Started with a dog, then went to a rabbit, then a hedgehog, and they started just getting a little bit more ridiculous with some of the animals. And there becomes a line, but now it's getting a little stricter in 2020. We're getting a little more strict, and the airlines are getting stricter about what constitutes an emotional support animal. And I was a little surprised to actually see that a small horse, a miniature horse, can be considered like a large dog as an emotional support level. Even in today's, if approved, that is a possibility of that being there. And I'm not saying that emotional support is not needed, because you can't tell someone that they don't have a condition, right? I mean, depression, anxiety, not being able to sleep, PTSD, those are all real things. They're all real things. And if an animal can help you cope with that, then I think that's amazing. But there are certain steps that you have to make sure that you do before being able to just say, oh, I'm going to take my pet for free on the flight, right? That's not what it is. It's not to be taken advantage of, because there are real people out there that have conditions that these animals are really utilizing and helping with them cope with these things. Now, one thing you're going to want to do is get an ESA letter. That's an emotional support animal letter, right? And you're going to want to go and register your animal. Okay, you're going to want to register them, and you're going to also want to contact the airlines. Once you have all the documentation and you have letters from, if you have your doctor, usually helpful to have a letter from your doctor. As much documentation as you can get, it allows the airline to understand your need for it. So I really implore you to look, when you're looking into that, to make sure you have as much documentation that you are one, have to have, because there are requirements, and two, the extra that you can have. Now, I know not everyone wants to share everything about their life and things like that, but just as long as you can have the minimum enough to show that this is needed for a real reason, then you should be fine. And again, if you have a service animal, if you require that, there are processes that you have to go through as well. So make sure that you contact the airline ahead of time. Don't just show up and assume that it's not going to be an issue. And it won't, but at the same time, you're going to have less hoops to jump through if you contact them in advance. So notice the difference being, though, an emotional support animal, you'll need advance notice, and approval is required to bring the animal with you. Okay, it has to get required, like it has to get approval before you can bring it with you. Just because you let them know in advance doesn't mean that they automatically are going to let you on. Now, with the service animal, as long as you let them know ahead of time, it makes your life a little bit easier, but they will approve it. That doesn't change that. It's just encouraged that you do that, but it's not required. The other thing is that there are requirements for the animals in general. Okay, if you have a service animal, they are a certain age before they are given to you. But if you have an emotional support animal, the animal must be 4 months or older. 4 months or older. So you can't have any of those little babies and those little cute things, No. Where everyone on the plane is going to want to stop and look and ooh and ah over. No. 4 months or older, the animal has to be. The animal must be able to fit at your feet or under your seat or in your lap. So you have those three: at your feet, under your seat, or in your lap. So if it is too large, then you might have to have the animal, might not be able to bring the animal with you, or you might have to have them put in the cargo area, but that defeats the purpose of having your emotional support animal with you, right? You want to make sure that you have a medical, mental, professional health form all figured out. Your vet health form needs to be, you need to go from your vet. You need to make sure you have those health forms, vaccination records, and they need to be current with their rabies. All that information you're going to need to have with you and have done prior to your trip. And then you're going to also need to get, for an emotional support animal, a confirmation of animal behavior form. And these are forms that you can go online and find. Those are all things that you're going to have to do. So there's a lot. You can't just show up with your animal and claim that they are your support and your emotional support and it to be okay. And it's not that you don't want to deny someone of that or say, well, I don't believe you. But there are people that try to take advantage of the situation, and that's the unfortunate thing. The other reason for all of these, you have to think about the airlines that you're traveling with. When there's not enough preparation and something actually goes wrong and happens, then it becomes a bigger issue. Then you have legal issues that happen and other people reacting. There was a story I read about a guy who came onto a plane and he was sitting in the middle seat, and the person on the aisle or the end had their emotional support dog with them. And the dog it was starting to growl when he was around, when he got into his seat. And throughout the flight, there was every so often the dog would kind of growl at him. And so it wasn't, and not that this necessarily, I'm not saying the dog was a bad dog or it was a bad owner, but the temperament of the dog was a little off or something. And at one point in the flight, and I wasn't there obviously, but in the story, he claims that the dog came at him. Now, he had to have stitches, and the dog did come at him, but as to what actually transpired, I'm not quite sure. But it caused an incident, and regardless of what side you're on with that, you don't want to be involved with that. And I think you need to make sure that you're thinking about your needs as well as the well-being of others that you're putting in that situation. Okay, if you know you have a hard time flying and you have to have an emotional support dog, maybe you don't fly. Maybe you look at a train, or maybe you look at renting a car and going traveling that way, and that's always an option to do. Just think about that before you get into those situations, because I think that it's great, but unfortunately we have people that do take advantage of the situation, and as travel becomes bigger and bigger and more accessible to everyone in different parts of the world, there's options for more people to open. It's basically opening the floodgates a little bit. You have to be able to sift through what's needed and who's just trying to get a free ticket for their animal and not have to pay those charges. Whether I needed an emotional support animal or not, I would actually be a little bit stressed out. I mean, it'd be great if I had that, my pup with me, and they were making me calm, and it was great. But at one point depending how long the trip is, if it was a longer flight, I would actually get a little more stressed out, I feel, thinking about the well-being of my dog. Are their ears hurting? Is the pressure of the plane? Are they... I don't want them to go to the bathroom anywhere. I don't want anything to happen, things like that. Because you think about that. You have to have those things in mind when you're traveling with your pet, especially on the plane. Now, let's say you just buy a seat for it and it's not an emotional support animal or a service animal, you don't want your dog just walking up and down the aisle, urinating or using the bathroom or defecating, along the plane. That becomes a health issue at that point. And now you're putting more people in that situation that you shouldn't. And so there's a lot of preparation that goes into having these animals and getting these registers the correct way and the forms filled out the right way. So make sure that you look into it. Talk to your doctor, talk to your vet, make sure that you have the proper documentation. Don't just go on the internet and fill out the first thing that you guys are going to see that say, register your pet here. I'm going to tell you right now, it could be anything. Make sure you look and go to the airline websites, let them know in advance, and double check any extra things that you need to have when you fly. That way you have no stress when you get there, and it's just a very pleasant hello with a big smile with you and for your emotional support animal, because I think they're a wonderful thing. Animals are fantastic. I'm always been a dog person. My wife I love all animals. We're not a cat household. I think that's mostly because of me. But there are some really wonderful cats that I've had experiences with in my life that I could see them just as a calming experience just to have next to me. So I completely understand that, and it's real. Emotional stress is real. So don't knock that at all. But we want to make sure that we aren't taking advantage of that. So if you are going to plan to have your emotional support animal, look into it and research ahead of time. If you have a service animal that you have to travel with, then make sure that you do as much to prep for your trip as you can by letting them know. There's less requirements, but make sure that you have what you need when traveling, so that way it's a little less stress-free on everyone. After the break, I'm going to be talking about some hotel chains here in the U.S. that are very pet-friendly that you might want to check into. Don't miss it.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. We were just talking about emotional support animals versus service animals. And it's really interesting to make sure that you know the difference between those two. And if you have or need an emotional support or service animal, make sure that you check with your doctors and vets and everything else and have the proper paperwork and things that you need before you travel. But speaking of our furry friends, when they do come with us, we want to make sure that wherever we're staying, they are just as comfortable as well. We want to make sure they're comfortable when they travel. We also want to make sure they're comfortable when they're sleeping and we are not traveling, right? So we're going to get into a couple of hotel chains here in the U.S. that are typically dog-friendly. Now, remember, this is going to vary hotels in different places in different cities. Some of the hotels in these chains are not as dog friendly in certain areas as others. But in general, you can probably count on these being more dog friendly hotels. I'm going to just dive right into this because there's really some great recommendations in here, and there's some really good quality chains. All right, so we're going to start right here at the top with some of the best hotels, right? The Four Seasons Hotel. The Four Seasons Hotel, that's right, Four Seasons Hotel and Resort accepts pets. Okay, now there are some that don't. It's a luxury hotel for those of you that aren't familiar with the Four Seasons. But if you're a traveler and you've ever wanted to stay somewhere really nice and just really spend that extra bit of travel on the luxurious side of things, you're going to be looking at Four Seasons. But it is a luxury brand and offers small dogs and cats, and those mean usually about 15 to 25 pounds. It can vary depending on the hotel, and they allow them to stay with you, and they have amenities for your pet as well. Things like beds, water bowls, or doggy or cat pads, things like that. And the concierges are pet friendly as well, and they're very helpful about finding local dog parks and things like that, and other properties that accept animals that tend not to charge, if that's what you're looking for. So the Four Seasons is definitely somewhere to look. Again, make sure you check with whatever hotel in whatever city you're staying with first to confirm that they are pet friendly. But typically Four Seasons, if you have an animal between 15 to 25 pounds, is going to be great. It's going to be welcomed with open arms, and it's going to have a wonderful time. And let me just say, if you're staying at a Four Seasons and your pet's going with you, man, they are getting a sweet vacation. Another one is La Quinta brand. La Quinta is a pet-friendly hotel scene, and they're one to allow bigger dogs. So they have over 800 or around 830 U.S. locations, and out of those 830 locations, only 4 don't allow pets. Okay, so when I mentioned earlier that you need to check where you're staying, just double check just to make sure, because you don't want to get there and then find out that they won't allow your pet to stay with you. But only 4 that we're aware of at this point are not pet friendly, and that for La Quinta, and that is San Antonio Conference Medical Center. That's the first one. Manhattan and Queens, New York, La Quintas. That's another one. And Monterey, California. So the Monterey, California, the Manhattan and Queens, New York hotels, and the San Antonio Conference Medical Center. They don't allow pets at all, but most La Quintas, except for those 4, or if not all the La Quintas, will allow up to 2 dogs or cats per room at no extra charge. And yes, you heard me right, at no extra charge. So if you're looking to stay somewhere and you have your furry friend and you don't want to shell out an extra bit of money just to have them stay with you, whether it's a road trip or you're staying somewhere, you're going to that family reunion and you want them to be there with you to, break the ice with all the relatives, you can stay at a La Quinta and it will not cost you anything. So I think that's pretty incredible. I think that's great. Another great hotel chain that you want to look into if you're traveling with your furry friend is the Fairmont Hotels and Resorts. They are a lover of dogs, and they even have their own canine ambassador program, which I think is really incredible. You have to double check the property. Again, I will keep saying that throughout this segment. No matter where you're traveling, it's always good to check out what the hotel actually offers, because it does vary in the chains. But typically, you're going to find that Fairmont hotels are going to be more dog friendly. For instance, here's an example of checking it out. For instance, at the Fairmont in Washington, D.C., Georgetown, dogs stay free. I mean, that's already right there. And they give them treats, handmade pastry, like executive pastry chef treats. So they get like quality stuff coming out, and they're staying free. So it's great. But you look at other places, like the Battery Wharf in Boston, which is a Fairmont hotel. Pets under 25 pounds cost $25 and receive a pet bed, food, and water bowls. So it just really depends on where you're going. So just, again, it's always best to kind of check it out. Our dog, we stayed at a DoubleTree. We stayed at a DoubleTree, and they allowed our pet that was under 25 pounds to stay with us. And our dog just loves, our dogs just love traveling with us. Of course, when we travel, when we take them, we're only driving, but they love the whole thing, the experience of the hotel. Our littlest dog is one that is less curious about her surroundings and more worried about what we're doing. So she kind of becomes a little stubborn in the stay, but once she's comfortable, she just makes herself at home, and it's really great. So I'm going to go into a couple more. Another one to look into, Hotel Indigo. Hotel Indigo. They are a big pet-friendly hotel chain. They're more of a boutique. Let me say that correctly. A boutique chain. Hotel Indigo is. So they're associated with the Intercontinental brand, and they have more than 36 hotels in the U.S. And they are always welcoming of dogs and most breeds of dogs and other pet animals, as long as they're behaved. Associated with some of those costs, it can be somewhere between $25 to $75, again, depending on location. There are even some of the hotels with Hotel Indigo that have resident dogs that they have on the properties. So you will find that this is going to be they're going to be more than accommodating for your furry friends. And so that is another chain that I highly encourage you to check out. Now, if you're looking for not quite as luxurious of a stay and you're traveling and you have a lot of people with you, or you're just wanting a place that you're going to find enough of these chains around the U.S. as you're traveling, the Red Roof Inn. The Red Roof Inn is a friend to almost all pets. The hotel chain has 360 pet-friendly properties. Only 3 Red Roof Inns don't accept pets, and that's only due to the local ordinances. That's the only reason that they won't allow them there. And they don't charge a nightly fee or deposit for your guests. So there's no fee or deposit that you have to put down, because again, you're going to want to check every hotel. I keep saying this again, wherever you're staying, that you're going to want to make sure you check if there's a fee or a deposit, because sometimes it's just a deposit, and just in case your pet decides that it doesn't like the room and makes it its own, does a little bit of redecorating, you might not get the deposit back. But some will have a deposit, and some will have a deposit and a fee, but you get the deposit back. So again, I'm trying to find some hotels for you that are free or have minimum stipulations that go with it. But Red Roof Inn is one that you will be able to find plenty of in their chain. Like I said, 360 properties. So they're worth checking out. Another one that I found that was interesting is Aloft Hotels. Aloft Hotels are part of the Marriott family. So if you have those Marriott points, this might be one that could really interest you. And I'm one who has Marriott points. We're part of Hilton Honors and Marriott. But if you're looking at specifically at a Marriott family hotel, Aloft Hotels is one to look at if you have your pets. They are pet friendly. And again, policies will slightly vary depending on where you're at and what location. So make sure you're checking before you're booking. But they have great programs. They provide beds, bowls, complimentary treats, and even toys, which is really great. They have 134 pet-friendly properties in major cities across North America. So that's a lot of properties and a lot of options for you to check out. So most locations allow 2 dogs under 40 pounds per room at no additional cost. Right there, bam, no additional cost. And if you have more than 1 dog, and it's Marriott, so you're getting to use those Marriott points, you got both your dogs with you, and it's not costing you a thing, this is going to be something or a hotel that you're going to want to look at. So you're going to want to check into Aloft Hotels on your trip and stay. So guests with larger dogs and other types of pets are encouraged to contact the hotel, and sometimes they'll be willing to work with you. So if your dog is, let's say, 45 to 50 pounds, because I know I had one dog at one point that was between 40 and 50 pounds, and it was really kind of a weird thing because when you're traveling to these hotels, you want to make sure that you're following the guidelines, but you're talking about a couple extra pounds here. Can't they just bend it? But sometimes they're very firm about their policies, and other times they're very willing to work with you. And Aloft Hotels will typically be willing to work with you as long as you contact them prior and talk to them a little bit. So just a heads up on that. But, that gives you a little bit more options. So that's great. The Kimpton Hotels is another chain, and that's part of the Intercontinental Hotels group. And they are also known for its animal attractions. They're known for its animal attractions. So everyone and their hotels, they will welcome dogs, cats, or other types of pets if you have them. I've been told that they will look at birds, or even if you have those lizards, or if you have to travel with a snake, if that's your pet, your choice. But no judgment there on my part, but everyone has their own taste. But yeah, if you bring your pet, they will be welcoming. So the Kimpton Hotels, part of the Intercontinental Hotel Group, is a pet-friendly chain. Some of the locations have a director of pet relations on staff to give you and your pet a great welcome. It's like your own personal concierge for pet. So it's, so they really roll out the red carpet for this, which I think is fantastic. You're going to get comfy pet beds, bowls, treats at check-in. They even have what they call a pet-friendly yappy hour reception in the evening. So I think that's kind of great. They're really tailoring your experience of your stay and your pet stay together, and I think that's wonderful. They have 60 properties in 34 cities in the U.S., so you want to make sure that you check those out. Now, the Kimpton welcome all pets with no additional fees regardless of the size, breed, or weight, and it puts no restriction on the number of pets. So if you have 3 pets or 4 pets, they're not going to put a restriction on that, and it's not going to cost you anything. So not only are you getting that pet concierge, the director of the pet relations, you're having the yappy hour, you get all your pets. It's not costing you anything. And they have some really great hotels, so you want to make sure that you check those out. Again, 60 properties in 34 cities. So look into Kimpton Hotels. That's another great chain here in the U.S. for all those pets. Now, the last one I'm going to get into is one that you may not think of, but they have more hotels around the U.S. than you can imagine. So if you're really just strapped and you need some place to stay and you're traveling with your pet, Motel 6 is always an option. Motel 6 apparently was the first national pet-friendly hotel chain. Okay, and they have been welcoming pets since 1962. 1962. So that's a long time. So I think that they're capable of handling this since they have a little bit of experience, right? And on top of that, Motel 6, there's at least 1,400 properties across the U.S. and even Canada. That's a lot of properties. Over 1,400 properties, right? Motel 6, they allow 2 dogs or cats per room with a combined weight of 150 pounds or less. And they don't charge additional fees. So again, it is an option. It is an option. If you're on that road trip and you are planning to draw, or you need a place to stay and you see a Motel 6 and you got your furry friend there, don't worry. They do allow you to have your pet there with you. So there you go. There are some hotel chains from the most luxurious to the most budget friendly, some that have deposits and fees, and some that are completely free. So make sure you always check out before you leave for your trip or book that hotel what their policies are, because some of them do change depending what city you're at. We want to make sure that you are comfortable, stress-free, and so is that furry friend that travels with you. Stay with us, because when you come back, we are going to be looking at the top 10 friendliest dog cities in the U.S. You're not going to want to miss it.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. We were just talking about pet-friendly hotels that you can stay at throughout the U.S. if you are traveling with your furry friend, and lots of great recommendations in there. So make sure that you check those out and what works best for you. But I'm glad you stayed with us to the end because we're going to give you a top 10 list of cities in the U.S. that are dog friendly. So this one speaks to my heart especially because I'm a dog person, and anytime we're visiting certain cities or wanting to go on road trips and things, we always love to know what cities in the U.S. are dog friendly. Not just where your hotel, but the city itself, because when you go on a trip and you have to leave your dog in the hotel the whole time, they get kind of lonely, and then you're putting them in a situation where they're not familiar, and then they're missing you, and it breaks our heart. That's all it does. So anytime that we can have our pet out and about with us, it's great. So I'm going to go through a couple. This may not be what you would imagine. This list might be a little bit different. Some of these I completely agree with, and some of these I'm a little more skeptical only because I haven't experienced bringing my dog to that city. And we're going to start with number 10. We're going to work our way backwards today. So number 10, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque, New Mexico. 33,000 acres of public parks, right? That's just crazy. That's just crazy. So that is a lot of parks. And that's a lot of space to be able to have your friends, especially if you're an outdoors person. You know, Albuquerque is going to be really great. If you want to put it into perspective, you're looking at about a quarter acre for each dog, cat, bird, and anything in the city. That's a lot of space. So there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room in Albuquerque. So I can see why, and I understand why they're making the list here. And it's just a friendly place. If you've never been to Albuquerque, it's wonderful actually. I love going through New Mexico. And being from Texas, it's an easy trip for me. So whenever I'm traveling over or going to see family in Arizona, I've gotten a chance to go to New Mexico. Plus, my college roommate was from Farmington, New Mexico, and we would go to his parents instead of coming back home when I'd come home to Houston. He would go to Farmington, and he invited me a couple times, and so I enjoyed it so much I'd go back and forth with him. So it's really great. You pass through Albuquerque. Farmington's a little bit closer to Colorado, but you get a chance to see that entire area, and my dog loved getting out and running around there. Number nine, Tucson, Arizona, okay? Tucson, Arizona, Arizona in general is it's dry weather, so it's really great. So you don't have that humidity that in the south or in some of those other areas that you want to melt, where it's only 90 degrees, but it feels like 130, kind of like here in Houston right now. We are located, between, New Mexico, Louisiana, and the sun. That's pretty much what it, as a friend of mine would say. That is pretty much where we are. But Arizona, you have a little bit more of drier heat, and so it's a really great for for those breeds that love that type of weather and are very active. The local parks and trails they're really scenic. It's really great, especially if you're outdoors. And Tucson is home to Pit Palooza. It's a festival celebrating pit bulls for National Pit Bull Awareness Day. So, and no worry about breed-specific legislation there at all. So, that's what they say. But yeah, so there you go. So you have a really cool area or a festival just celebrating dogs in general. So that is great. Number eight, according to this list of dogtime.com, it's San Diego, California. San Diego, California. And San Diego, I totally see, just because it being by on the coast, and most of these are going to be coastal cities. There's going to be some that surprise you, but I wasn't surprised to see San Diego on this list. In home, it's in fact considered a surf dog. They have what's called the annual Surf Dog Surfathon. I'll make sure I said that right. It's home to the annual Surf Dog Surfathon. That's right. And restaurants have patios where pups can join their owners. So it's very welcoming. So if you have that you like that beach vibe and you're right there on the water and you just want to go and eat. I mean, when the weather's that gorgeous, you don't want to go inside anyway. So it's wonderful that they allow dog owners to dine while their pet is with them on outdoor patios and things like that. And again, something fun. Get those dogs in the water and playing. That's great. So again, moving down this list, this one I was completely shocked at, and I shouldn't say completely, but it took me by surprise, and Boston, Massachusetts makes the number 7. I wasn't as familiar with the Boston area because that's one of the cities that I have on my list to go to. But apparently it is according to dogtime.com, it's a fun town for pups and owners, as many of the local bars offer, again, this word that we found, in quotes, yappy hours. So the yappy hours is basically a nice little drink, and you get to bring your dog there with you. And so it's a very big thing around there. And Boston apparently is very canine friendly. So if you're looking for a city that's not necessarily in the south or on the water on the west coast, you want to go to the east coast, Boston is an option as a dog-friendly town. Now, another one that I looked at, and I found this, and this was on a different source that I was looking at. This compared the pet budget ranking with the pet health and wellness ranking, as well as the outdoor friendliness of this. And so I put this as my number 6. I put this one as my number 6, and this was kind of based on some of the research that I've done. And I'm going to say that mine is Seattle, Washington. Now, Seattle is ranked number 7 in pet health and wellness and 11th in pet friendliness, like outdoor friendliness and things like that. So they're definitely in a top 10. You may agree with them being higher or lower, whichever. That's fine. I put them right here at number 6. They're just, it's Seattle. The weather's really kind of gorgeous. Some people would put them a little bit higher. It's considered to be a complete people-person city, dog-friendly city. And according to dogtime.com, they say that there are more dogs in Seattle than children. And I think that's interesting. That's really interesting. And to me, for a dog lover, I think that's kind of awesome. They even have an indoor dog park. So if you don't want to pack your umbrella and rain boots, and that makes more sense. I mean, they have rain happening, I don't know, was it 80% of the time up there, or 70% of the time it rains, or they say it's always raining in Seattle. That Tom Hanks movie, Sleepless in Seattle, is now flashing in my head. But it makes sense for them to have an indoor dog park up there. And so that's great. It's just another amenity to have. So great. So Seattle is making my list at number 6. Now, moving into the top 5. I'm going to move into the top 5. At number five, I'm going to be putting Austin, Texas at number 5. They are ranked number 2 in pet and health wellness, and they are also ranked 54th in outdoor friendliness. And that's a little bit lower, I know, as far as the outdoorness, but pet wellness is really high. And being very familiar with Austin and going there many, many times, there's so many things to do. There's really neat landscaping. You can get out to the hill country. There's plenty of lakes. And the food scene in Austin is wonderful, and they are very, very pet-friendly as far as allowing your pets to come sit with you on the patios and places like that. It's really great. I can't even tell you. One thing that they have that I think is really cool, they have a food truck that serves up plenty of natural treats for pups on a walk, and it's called Bow Wow Bones. It's a local food truck in Austin, and that kind of tells you right there how friendly that they are when they're dedicating food trucks and restaurant space specifically to you and your dog. So I think that's really great. You can also take a yoga class with your dog at Austin Doga. I found that one. That's kind of neat. I'm not exactly the yoga type. I would rather do the Pilates. I know my wife loves yoga as well as Pilates. So that might be something that she might look into if we ever go visit my brother in the upcoming weeks in Austin. So Austin makes my list at number 5. So moving right along, and we are now in the top 5. Looking at number 4. I am going to give some extra love to Scottsdale, Arizona. They are ranked number 1 in pet health and wellness, as well as number 6 in outdoor friendliness. So Scottsdale, Arizona, it's not surprising. I mean, we had Tucson up there earlier, and I know Scottsdale is kind of, I know some people might argue that, but if you've ever been to Tucson and Scottsdale, they're very different, and even though they're very close and they have some of the same landscape, they're two different types of cities. So you have a different flavor in each of them, which I think is really great. And I think Scottsdale is wonderful for all the things that Tucson has, plus just the overall experience of having your dog and being surrounded by businesses that have allowing dogs in their shops and things like that, as well as restaurants where you can bring them inside as well as outside. And again, that dry weather is just really great. Humidity, depending on the breed, but when you have high humidity, it can be really rough for some dogs. So that's really great. All right, moving along to number 3. Okay? I'm going to give this one up. We're going to go back to the West Coast. San Francisco, California. That's right. San Francisco, California is going to be my number 3. And if you've never been to San Francisco, the weather is just fantastic. It's California. It's the West Coast. You have a nice, cool breeze in the mornings off the bay when you're in San Francisco. You have a lot of winds. You're right there with beaches along the water, so it's really great. There's natural trails. The park, the Golden Gate Park right there is a wonderful place, you know. And the other thing that I found out, that pups are allowed on trolleys. So there are you can bring your pup on the trolley, okay? So San Francisco also has the lowest average in pet deposits. That's that. I think if you're looking to rent or move there, I think that's a great thing to have. And they're also home to Dog Fest, the annual festival that celebrates dogs and raises money for local elementary schools. So there you go. You're helping the community as well as celebrating the love of dogs. So I think it's really great. There's a lot of dog owners in California in general, and that's why some of these cities are making them. But San Francisco, great city. They're making my top list right there. Moving into the top 2 spots. All right, here we go. So number 2, I'm going to give Colorado Springs, Colorado, the number 2 spot. They are 42nd in pet health and wellness rank, and they are also, but they're 12th in outdoor pet friendliness. So they kind of balance each other out a little bit. Colorado is gorgeous anyway, just being around the mountains. You have different landscapes, very outdoorsy. It's a nature's dream out there. I mean, it's great. So I put them at number 2. Not only are there plenty of dog parks, there are places like the Crags Trail, they say, or Pike National Forest, or even Seven Falls, which is a canyon filled with like beautiful waterfalls. So there's lots of different places for you to go with your pet, and they're very inclusive. And it's a place that if you have one of those dogs that adores the outdoors, Colorado Springs is going to be one of the places that they are just going to drool about. They're going to dream about it. You know, when you see their little legs running when they're sleeping, that's what they're dreaming about. They're dreaming about these places. Great. So let's move into my number 1. My number 1, and this was on several lists and when I found in research, number 1 is Portland, Oregon. And that's right, Portland, Oregon. So we're going back up to the upper West Coast up there. Portland is considered a very friendly dog city. I think it's great for so many reasons. They are ranked 21st in pet health and wellness and 9th in outdoor friendliness. That's a very, very high, considering that we're looking at, kind of more in the top 100 as far as cities goes. But they have 33 dog parks, more dog parks per capita than any big city in the country. That's pretty amazing. I mean, that is another reason why Portland makes the number 1 in this list, and many people's lists, actually. It has its own social network for dog lovers. I mean, now these days, who doesn't have a social network for dog lovers? And it's also, I found out, home to the Lucky Labrador Brewing Company. For all you beer lovers out there, there you go. The Lucky Labrador Brewing Company, where you can have a beer and hang out with your dog at the same time. So those are between the outdoors, the weather, and just the social networking and the way they incorporate dog living to the rest of everything that they do up there. I give Portland, Oregon, my number 1, and many other people give them the number 1 of cities that are dog friendly. So there you go, guys. There's my list. I hope you have been inspired to take a trip this year or look to start planning one. It's never too late to start traveling. It can open our eyes to new experiences, even unlock things about our lives that we never knew. I believe everyone should travel and explore more of what this world has to offer. It can give us an appreciation and love for so many things. So let's get traveling.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.